All right. Welcome to the May 17th Plan and Zone meeting. May I have a roll call, please?
Gibson. Here. Kapler. Here. Ormsby. Here. Satterfield.
Here.
Stoltenberg.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
Little back feet, okay.
Can I put a mute?
Roy, can you put yourself on mute? Thank you. All right, welcome to the Plan and Zone Commission. This is a seven-member commission appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. The commission is a recommending body, only with the city council making the final decisions. Regular meetings of the Plan and Zone are held on the third Wednesday of each month at 5:30 in the City Hall council chambers. Special meetings may be held at such times as necessary. We review rezoning requests, preliminary and final plats, site development and landscape plans, and planned unit development plans. And I would ask the audience, when it's your time to speak, if you could go up to the podium, give your name and address so that it gets into the record. We'd appreciate it. Thank you. With that, approval of the minutes from last month.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of the minutes of the April 19th meeting as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. I think, all right, we're good to go. All right, from there, we'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be giving you a quick update on case 22097. This is at 3150 Glenbrook Circle South. This is a major site development plan change. What that means is you have a site development plan that's in place, and there's a petition to change that site development plan in a significant way. You last saw this case in February, I think February 19, if I'm not mistaken on the date. So some of these slides are going to be familiar. I only got a few to go over, so there's not a lot of new information here. Devil's Glen Road here, Glenbrook Circle South here, the Quartet Senior Living Facility. The entire site development plan that is up for modification, if you will, is kind of outlined in this teal blue color. And really the case is about looking at removing out of this approved site plan the green space, stormwater detention area, and outlot F here, taking that out of the site development plan that was approved for the Quartet. Not so much looking at the future development of the site, although that is in the staff report, which you saw back in February, that is part of the step 3 in that analysis where you look at the future compatibility. But really, I want you to focus today and just kind of refresh yourself with this concept of modifying a site plan by taking out what was designated open space and drainage, stormwater, and making a recommendation on that. And then here is just, for your ratification, the site plan that was approved back in it's case 19100 for that entire site. Again, that is now the Quartet. So we had a lot of discussion at our last February meeting about this case, and I think the choice that was made at that time was to table it or postpone it and try and come back and get a better idea of what might come in the future. We haven't received a future development drawing that's any different than what we've had before. So the petitioners want to bring the case back and really ask you to look at removing that 3.80 acres site out of what's considered the approved site plan for the Quartet, which that site would still work. The Quartet itself would still work. It would still be a valid site with bulk standards and height restrictions all being met, but really don't have a new idea of what's coming forward on that three acres. So you kind of have four options, really three options. You could recommend approval. These are the same options you have every time, by the way. You could recommend approval of the major site development plan change as presented. You could recommend the city council disapprove as presented, or you could recommend approval with some conditions. And fourth, not really an option because these cases per code still present to council even if you somehow try to table or delay or take other action. The way our code reads is that in a certain number of days it transforms up to the council level and gets reviewed anyway. So number 4 is, while technically an option, it doesn't really do anything. doesn't achieve anything. You have a memo that I put on top of the site plan or the top of the staff report. I assume you've all read through that. In that memo, you probably saw these same options. And so hopefully not a shock there. One thing you might think about is what those conditions might be, and I think the conditions would be that this site development plan, if you were going to conditionally approve it, this change would require that the 3.0 acres, this piece, come forward with an approved site plan in some amount of days, some amount of time. I don't know if you did put a time limit on it. And if it doesn't, then it reverts back at some amount of time back to this overall site plan that was already approved. So let me say that another way. You could recommend approval of the major change that would take out this 3.08 acres, only if that a approved site development plan comes forward for this 3.08 acres that meets all of our city codes as required. Let me just kind of give you a background on what those might look like. So here's just some key zoning controls and other constraints that if you do approve the major change, that opens up that 3.08 acres for development, what you would have to do to develop lawfully under the city's code on that 3.08 acres. And right now, Outlot F is reserved for common open space. I think there's a typo on my slide, sorry about that. It's also encumbered by a 79-foot pipeline easement, so there's some constraints on Outlot F. That's that small kind of piece to the east. You've got several easements that exist at the north, south, and east side of this lot 2. I'm not going to read them off, but there's multiple easements that are there, which is a common occurrence on property. You've got a limit of 17 units per acre. So if you've got 2.5, 3 acres, that's around 40 units per acre. That's just code. You've got a front yard setback of 25 feet. You've got a minimum side yard setback of 5 feet. You've got to have 15 total. Rear yard setback is also 25 feet. Max height is 40 feet or 3 stories. And floor area ratio is 70%. That's just taking all the area on the ground and doing a ratio to the total area of all floors combined. And it can't be more than 70%. So you can't have floor space more than 70% of total land space. So those are just some constraints that would be there. Again, I'm not going to go back through the whole case. We spent a long time on it. You have the memo. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Staff is comfortable with number 3 as long as that condition is clearly stated that within X amount of time, it has to come back and be an approved site development plan on this open space area that we're removing out of the Glenbrook Circle or 3150 Glenbrook Circle South. If it doesn't, then that just reverts back. I'd be happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any commission members have any questions?
I do. Just to be clear. In our February discussion of this, you've got a paragraph in here, Mark or Taylor, whoever did
Yeah.
that back in February, removing the open space drainage from the quartet's site development plan, replacing it with development will reduce the internal transition and buffering between uses.
That's a true statement. Yep.
Still true.
Still true. Yeah.
We're still talking about removing that.
Yeah. I think.
So what's changed? Because the more this transitional buffer is eroded, the less supportive staff would be of the change. So I do understand that we don't know what's coming yet, but in your conditions on zoning, and if I missed a team, I apologize. But
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, so is the drainage not necessary? The stormwater detention on the site?
No, it's not that it would go away. They would not simply be able to go fill it in. This is really, and Chris, if I'm explaining this wrong, Mark, but we're really talking more of a procedural step to allow them to bring forward an actual site plan instead of us just looking at concepts that Mark pointed out may have some issues, but it's a step to allow that to occur. Anything they bring forward would have to meet all of our requirements. We've seen calculations of what they've proposed. They can make the detention work, for example. It's a lot of work and probably a lot of investment, but they can make those things happen. But until they bring forward that step, and we can't get to that step until the change would be allowed, basically is where we're at. So it's not like it goes away by any means.
And we haven't gotten this far with you thinking it would flood the neighbors, obviously. So,
absolutely.
I see. Thank you.
And if I may, can I step into, because I think Brian and Mark have laid this out very well, but I just want to reiterate that this is a unique situation, and this particular step is really a process step. We do know that, that something, if we approve this, then something could come at the next stage. And that's when the issues of stormwater and buffering and those sorts of things would really be looked at. Here we are allowing, essentially what this is to allow us to get a full site plan of what would be proposed at that next step. At that next step, you still go through the entire appendix on site plan review in a DCA district, which is very complex. I mean, approving it at this stage allows us to get the actual site plan. And I think that would be maybe a better way for the commission to take a full analysis of this project or
maybe-
proposed
maybe what's
project.
All the
changed
info.
is-
So in effect, it was approved as it is with this being green space. We're just saying it was approved, we're removing this part. Now they can do something with it, come forward with some ideas for us to review.
Yes, and it's staff opinion, and it was in the memo that the quartet still works without this. It still meets our bulk standards, it still meets our height restrictions, it still meets our setbacks. So that was never.
And the square
never
foot area that you talked about, 70%.
Yeah, yeah, I think it does, yeah.
Okay.
We wrote, when we wrote our staff report, we looked at, could the quartet itself exist without that green space? Yes, it can. It meets the criteria. The rest of the staff report, if you go through the analysis, makes you contemplate what might come in the future. What has changed is we are changing our conclusion to be that while we recommended against approval, if you wanted to approve it with these conditions that say, okay, yeah, we get that you can still have the quartet and not have this green space that was built into the site plan, but we're only giving you that temporarily until you bring us something that can fit on this site. If you don't, then it goes back to the quartet site plan.
So
But I
what
think
is,
that's a clarification of our staff report, not a change.
What is stopping them from bringing the site plan to you now? Why couldn't they just
That's up to
show
the
you what
that's
they
up to the
have?
petitioner.
Right,
Well,
so,
I mean, we did, we've worked with the developer here quite a bit. And DCAs are unusual. This was an unusual situation. I think we never told them, we need to see your full site plan now. We thought that this would be the best way. We know that they can't bring that forward until we amend the current site plan. If we don't get past allowing the amendment, taking out the detention or retention, whatever it is, then they can't bring that forward. So this was what we felt to be the best and most efficient way. It's a two-step process. Could it have been a one-step? I think it could have been a one-step at the same time, but this is just really, it still needed to be a two-step. You still needed to amend the current site plan and then have a new site plan. And that's what this would allow us to do. It allows us to get to step two.
saying yes tonight doesn't mean we can't say no later.
Correct. I mean, that's why the condition of if something isn't approved on lot two, then it would revert back to what the site plan is today. So it doesn't tie our hands in the future. It allows the developer to bring forward a full site plan.
So following along with that discussion and Janessa's question, since we've talked about this for quite a long time, if we are going to consider this conditional approval, I would be apt to not put an extremely long timeline on this because there's already been a lot of time. So I don't know what's a reasonable amount of time, but I don't think we want to do this for years and years. We're making a change here to get this to move forward. So I think we need to have a reasonable
Seems
amount of
like a
time.
few months is a reasonable.
Yeah, but
amount of
not a long amount of time.
Yeah, I purposely left that out of my staff report because I think it's worth the discussion.
So I guess the question then becomes, what's reasonable? Is
Right.
that a couple of months, 3 months?
I would assume.
6 months?
I would assume the petitioner's probably been working on something in the time since they've talked to us. So ideally, they would have a month or two to be able to prepare things enough to be able to get it presented to us.
Yeah.
Is that within our power as a commission to request and put a timeline on this? Because really, this goes to council because of the time that has passed, right? And we're not questioning right tonight whether this goes, whether we approve or disapprove. It's whether or not it goes to council one way or the other. The time that has passed, correct?
It's going,
Well, I think
Procedurally,
it's
that's
going to
going.
council.
If we
either way.
kick the can again, then it
Yeah.
goes to council, right?
Goes to
It's gonna go to council and.
Yeah, so is that within our, as a commission, can we put a timeline on things, Chris?
You can put conditions on it, which we recommend a condition that this amended site plan is conditioned on the approval of a site plan on Lot 2. And if there's not an approval, then it reverts back to the current site plan.
So that has to have a
But
date.
the date,
has to have a
the date is open. I guess the first question I would have is what action, approval by council? Because if it's approved by council, then that elongates the time period. I would say 6 months seems to be a more than fair period of time. But I'm not an engineer. I don't know how that all works, and perhaps the developer would like to weigh in on that issue.
And so if I understand this to be clear, if whatever timeline we put on there, if the time expires, they could just come right back and do the same thing
Yeah,
again.
that's right. It would just
Probably could ask
be
for another
another step.
procedural, right?
Yeah.
So before we go any further, I would like to ask, what is the timeline you'd like to see us put on this if we were to go this route? Haven't forgot about you, Roy.
I'm here.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Brian Belk, Acting Consultants Engineer, representing the applicant. Thank you for the discussion and communication here. I think 6 months is fair and good, and I only say that because back and forth that we might need between the architect and the applicant and the owner, just to make sure we're adjusting as needed and checking off all the boxes that are discussed tonight. I think that's an ample time for us to make those documents work and get back submitted. So I think the request for 6 months is adequate, and we can make that work if that is something that you'd be willing to do.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Roy, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm clear where we're at.
Any other questions, concerns? All right. Anyone in the audience wish to address this?
My name is Frank Marari, and I live at 4001 Creek Hill Drive. My wife, Constance Marari. And we have 2 units there, a duplex. And from what I hear the committee, that they want to put a time limit on something that might change life of the citizens for a long time. I think the time limit should not be put on citizens' life, because what the plan that I saw last week that was proposed, talking about maybe 100 cars, an additional 100 cars there. I don't know if the committee went there and take a look at the site and see what the development could be, or the developer could do a different plan. Maybe they could do something like we have there.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I think
Oh,
we
that's
just
not
need to
for us?
address that. at a
Are we on
different
maybe
table.
a different?
Yeah, wrong case.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna be quite a while before we get to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
That's
apologize.
okay. That's okay.
Thank
All right. Anyone else? No? Okay. The developer have anything else? No? All right. Any thoughts in the
How are
commission?
we going to say this? You want a motion?
If we're ready, if you're ready.
You want me to recommend something?
That would be
That'd be
awesome.
great.
Okay.
Chris, thank you.
as I understood, perhaps the commission's desire for a conditional recommendation, I believe something along the lines of recommend approval of case number 22097 for conditional recommendation conditioned upon city council approval of a site plan for Lot 2, potentially including Outlot F of Glenbrook Ridge, 3rd edition, and in the absence of approval of the site of such revised site plan within 6 months from today's date, that the amended site plan shall revert to the previously approved site development plan. Is that close?
I would like to make that motion as you stated.
Yeah, very well said, Chris.
Yes.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion pass.
Thank you, Chris.
And, all right, we're moving on to Taylor.
All right. Next case before the commission, 23-038. This is a final plat for Wilderness Point, 2nd edition. This is located west of Criswell, just north of Oak Ridge Court, which is Wilderness Point, 1st edition. The applicant is Jared Kirchhoff. The proposed subdivision proposes 9 lots, of which 6 are developable, proposed for single-family detached homes. So 2 parcels will be subdivided, and the yellow area is where the proposed subdivision and lots will be. The future land use map designates this area as urban low intensity and parks and open space. The parks and open space lies within the western area of the subdivision. The proposed use is compatible with the character of the area, and demand exists for single-family homes as proposed. The zoning for the area is R1 Single-Family Residence District. The surrounding districts include R1 as well, and then single-family R2 to the north. The proposed plat shows lots ranging in size from a little under an acre to almost 2 acres. These are much larger than the minimum lot size required in R1. 3 outlots exist. Outlot A is designated for sewer, drainage, and detention easements. Outlot B and C are located respectively on Lot 2 and 3. They are undevelopable and will be owned by the adjacent property owner and maintained by that property owner. Oak Ridge Court provides access and terminates at a cul-de-sac in the addition. Sidewalks will be constructed on both sides of the street and connect to Wilderness Point, 1st edition sidewalks to the south. Staff has no more analysis on this and meets all of our subdivision code and zoning code and recommends approval of the final plat of Wilderness Point, 2nd edition. I can take any questions.
Any questions from the commission?
None from Roy.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience have any questions on this? Comments? Nope. All right. Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of case 23-038, subject to staff recommendations, which is for approval.
All right. Great.
Okay, I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Next case before the commission, 23-031. This is a site development plan for Lot 7, Betplex First Edition. This lot is located north of Forest Grove Drive, west of Friendship Path, and south of Competition Drive. The applicant is Paul Buffelli of Build to Suit. The development proposes 2 medical, office / healthcare buildings and with the associated off-street parking. Future land use map designates this area and the surrounding areas north of Forest Grove Drive as urban medium intensity. On the south side of Forest Grove Drive, we have urban low intensity, some single-family homes. The current zoning designation is C3, General Business District. To the east, we also have C3. To the north, the Betplex, which is our C7 Entertainment District. And the west, we have undeveloped A1 agricultural. I will add that the western side yard setback for this lot is shown on the site plan as 5 feet and the buffer yard. Normally, when they have two intense district next to a less intense district as C3 and A1R, a required 30-foot buffer yard would be required. One exception is in the code for this. When the A1 area is likely to be developed in the near future, the future land use designation can be used as a guide, and staff contends that this area will be developed as an urban medium intensity, likely commercial, C2 or a higher intensity residential. So a 5-foot yard in this case on the west side makes sense. On the east side, there's parking in the front yard. It encroaches 4 feet. The Board of Adjustment approved a variance for that parking in the front yard. It's a 4-foot encroachment, as mentioned, at the May 11th meeting. Going to the site plan. The site plan proposes 1 dumpster shared by both buildings, located on the west side of the parking lot. The site plan proposes 2 curb cuts onto Friendship Path. Staff is recommending only 1 curb cut containing up to 3 lanes that aligns with a private drive for Trillium business across to the east. I can talk about that further on the next slide. Sidewalk is shown on the Friendship Path. Staff is also recommending a sidewalk be shown on the north side, which is Competition Drive. This would allow for future connectivity to development to the west, also connectivity to the Betplex, and then you'd have sidewalks on all 3 frontages. All stormwater is conveyed to an off-site detention pond located east of the development. And shown before you is an overall regional plan of the Betplex commercial developments. So the 2 buildings are shown here, the blue dots. The Trillium Drive is right here. So staff is recommending the curb cut align with this. This would increase safety, circulation, turning movements for existing and future developments. The stormwater, as mentioned, regional stormwater is on lot 6 of the Betplex 3rd edition. So all stormwater for this development will be conveyed across Friendship Drive or underneath on that lot. Looking at the parking, a total of 79 parking stalls are provided, including 4 ADA spaces. Per our parking requirements and the defined uses of medical and healthcare, medical office and healthcare, sufficient spaces are provided. Taking a look at the landscape plan, the proposed development shows a total of 23 tree factors, all in the front streetscapes, which has 3 front yards. 2 parking islands are shown with plantings in the off-street parking area. Both these proposals meet our code requirements in our landscape handbook. Here's some renderings of the proposed buildings. Might be a little hard to see, but they are consistent with the character and the development around the Betplex and match the design characteristics. Staff contends the proposed development meets site development standards and code requirements. Staff recommends approval of the site development plan, case 23-31, with the following two conditions: allowing only one curb cut on Friendship Path and a 5-foot sidewalk be constructed on Competition Drive. I can take any questions.
All right. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that what we see here for the landscape plan, the site plan, doesn't quite jive with your recommendation.
Correct. So there would be, all those conditions would need to be amended into the site plan and the all associated plans, parking plan, landscape plan,
So if we approve
prior
this-
to council approval.
Okay, thank you. Any commission comments, questions?
Taylor, I just want
And
to be sure I understand. So the southernmost building, A, has one tenant, and the northernmost building has the potential for 3 different tenants.
Yeah, as I understand, BD Dental would be the owner occupier of one building, and then they have building out the other building for medical tenants. That's as shown on the floor plan.
Okay. And so when we look at parking, are we looking at total square footage, or the fact that there's 3 different businesses in there, does that increase the parking count?
So our off-street parking table it's organized by defining the uses on site. So we have defined uses in our code. Medical, office, and healthcare are 2 defined uses. And then you move on to the parking table. There's different calculations for different uses. In this case, we actually look at number of exam rooms, nursing stations, and it's actually not on square footage. So it's a little
Okay.
different type of,
Evaluation.
so we have to look at that, we have to peek at that floor plan to see the parking counts. And this, yep.
So there's a possibility on the other building when it's whatever business goes in there might be limited.
The floor plans were attached in the staff report. I did not include those here. But given the floor plan, given what we know now on those floor plans, the parking is sufficient. And when we, at the Board of Adjustment meeting, talking to the developer, the parking couldn't be constrained, couldn't be reduced. The applicant believes they will need all that parking, so they went forward with the variance request. The parking is in the front yard, but the required landscape buffer is only 15 feet on Friendship Path, so the landscaping will be still the same. There'll be a little less grass and that will be partial parking spots. That makes sense.
Can you answer me, what is the setback we have on the ball diamonds
To the north,
to the north?
Parking lot in between.
it's C7. I do not have that offhand. I'll ask for.
We can get that for you. I think it's less than 20.
I believe it's similar to our C3 district, which is, and C7's technically a more intense district. So 20 feet is our smallest setback. That's a front yard setback, side yards. And this particular property has 3 front yards, so it's quite encumbered. And one reason why the narrowness of the lot, when this was developed, Friendship Path to the south was already developed. And given the amount of property that was owned by the developer, we wish to have Friendship Path aligned so that that lot 7 was narrowed, required to be narrowed by the city as a wish to have that alignment.
Survey says 20 feet.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the commission? No. All right, anyone in the audience wish to address us? No one, okay. Roy, do you have any questions, comments?
no, sir, I'm good. I'd make you a motion if you like.
Go for it.
I'd make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve case 23-031 site development plan, medical office, dental buildings, subject to staff recommendations, as well as the modification for one single entry point.
Perfect.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? No? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
Ready, Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
We're taking these two cases together here. They're both 23028 and 23029. First being the Hopewell Farms Second Edition final plat, and the second being the site development plan for what will be the future Lot 1 of Hopewell Farms Second Edition. The area shown here in the aerial fronts Middle Road, and then you have Hopewell Avenue on the northern boundary. You have Century Heights 19th here, Fieldstone Point here. The Meadows down here is a subdivision. And then you have the Sartain property, which is farm-related. And then you have this general area here, which is stormwater detention owned by the city of Bettendorf. The zoning presently is A1. It's in the process of being changed to R3 Mixed Residential District. This is R3 down here in the Meadows. We have R1 here at Fieldstone Point and R1 at the Century Heights 19th edition. And then we have A1 surrounding to the west and to the southwest and then to the north. The land uses are varied. This parcel is split in two, urban medium intensity up front where the church anticipates locating, and then urban low intensity in the rear portion. And we can see urban low intensity the further you go to the east. If you do go further north, Hopewell, the urban medium intensity area begins to go almost to the point where it's partially would be encroaching, I guess, or on the other side of Century Heights 19th edition. And then there is urban high intensity further to the north as well. So the intensities tend to get greater as you go toward this intersection of Hopewell and Middle Road. This is the current plat. It's all Lot 1, Hopewell Farm First Edition, which is platted approximately 20 years ago. There is an easement that runs through here that incorporates the necessary utilities to connect further to the north, sanitary and storm. We go take a look at the proposed plat. We have a Lot 1 here, which is anticipated for the church site. We have an area that is kept open here in Outlot A for a 100-year floodplain, and then we have various outlots along all these lots. These lots here, 2 through 29, are anticipated to be used for townhouse development. And these areas here, there's also this buffer area here, 30 feet, facing Century Heights 19th edition and Fieldstone Point. As part of what we are discussing in the next case here, we are looking at the site development plan for the church. This will give you an idea of the outline of the building structure. The means of access will come off of Hopewell, and it will be directly here. The former access design of having this church connected to Middle Road has been dropped by the petitioner. This will give you an idea of the elevation as it faces Middle Road and how the church will look. Site development, I should say landscape plan, shows where the trees will be. The tree factor count was met by offering greater caliper size on some of these trees at 4 inches, which is double the normal amount, and then 3 inches on some of these, which is 1 inch greater than what is required. So the tree count has been met per the landscape ordinance. As part of this site, what is being considered as well is 100-year floodplain going through here, and any structures will have to be kept outside of that area. That was the idea behind the outlots being created. And also the church area, the way that's laid out, also that area is kept out, any construction out of that 100-year flood area. There is a regional detention basin here that is part of, was platted as part of Century Heights 10th, 11th, and 12th editions, and this ground now is under the control of the city. The areas outlined here show the 100-year floodplain in this light green color. Give you an idea, we have a buffer that was used at one time, still is in use, I should say, for one of the Glenbrook Ridge additions. This is what was proposed as part of a rezoning about 20 years ago, that there be a 25-foot buffer area here of evergreens on the west side and then on the northern boundary of the original Glenbrook Ridge addition and subsequent additions, and that is intact today. That is also being placed here as part of Hopewell Farm Second Edition, but this is a 30-foot area here of what would be vegetative cover, buffer, 30 feet in width. We are not anticipating permitting any structure other than utilities to go into this buffer area. No variances, no structures may permeate that area where there's a structure that is of a support nature that would go in there. Staff, in looking at the proposal, would make a recommendation for approval of the final plat of Hopewell Farms Second Edition with the conditions in here, the 30-foot buffer, potentially of evergreen plantings along Fieldstone Point and Century Heights 19th editions or whatever will be used to create an opaque buffer. That also a site plan as approval is required for the townhouse development for lots 2 through 29 of Hopewell Farms Second Edition. Conditions that relate to the site development plan, that the water purification structures regarding the church are approved by city engineer prior to the certificate of occupancy being issued, that all solid waste collection and snow removal are upon the church itself, and then that also there is an added condition that the parking lot shall be surfaced and striped prior to the certificate of occupancy being issued. Staff in reviewing these proposals would recommend approval in both cases. I would ask, are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
I have one. Greg, on this, whoops, go back. Can you go back to the screen you just had up? I'm seeing the church as it's laid out, and along the right side, there's parking. And it looks to me like there's a very tight corner there between the property to the, right there. Yeah, talk to me about that. Explain that to me and the setbacks and what's happening there.
That right here, for the parking, this would be a side yard essentially. So you're looking at 5 feet
5 feet.
on that side.
And that meets the requirements?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other question I have, and this may be that I'm a little bit confused. So when I look at the final plat, I see 3 lots, 1, 2, and 3. And when I look at the, okay, so then when I look at the recommendations on the first case, 23028, it tells me that a site development plan is required for approval. So we have the site development plan for the church.
The church and the site development plan that is referred to there is for these townhouses. This is not before us tonight, but that will be a condition, just to give you a heads up, as it were,
So we're not
that is
asking
coming.
for it now, we're making a condition that we
Yes.
need to see it.
That will be a requirement because they are townhouses.
Okay, That's what I needed to understand. Thank you.
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, so just tonight you have, there's probably like three pieces at play here. You have a site development plan for the church, you have a site development plan for the townhouses, and you have a plat, a legal determination of the property boundaries. You have those three things at play. Tonight before you are only the plat that covers those two big lots and the site development plan for the church. We're not contemplating a site development plan for the townhomes at this time.
Thank you for clarifying that. I felt like there was a missing piece, but that's okay. We'll see it later.
Yep.
Okay.
Any additional questions from the commission? Okay, hearing none. Any, go ahead.
I was just, for clarification, if we're looking at the entire area, why do we only have one and not the other?
Yeah, so the petitioner has the opportunity to bring those at different
I
times.
understand.
Once they establish a plat of two developable pieces of property, then they can bring the petition forward to develop that property, you know, at their will. And they have decided to bring the church forward first.
But both areas are asking to go from R1 to R3.
Yep, the rezoning has already been through this body, and the rezoning had its first reading at city
Yep.
council last night.
So all the plat is the legal subdivision.
Okay.
It's the
Legal
dividing
subdivision.
lines.
That's what I was thinking. Thanks,
Yep.
Brent.
All right. Anyone in the audience wish to address this issue?
Good evening. Glenn Dugan, 5736 Butterfield Court. The residents around this property are confused at the moment. Are we here to talk about the residential portion of the proposal or the church portion tonight?
Kind of both.
Both.
Yes, so
Okay.
the plat is just separating the property.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about the site development of the church, but not the residential part. There's three pieces to this. First, we have to separate it.
And by separate it, Scott just means creating the individual lots from the larger lot. So that's just the legal, as long as that meets all of our minimum lot sizes and the setbacks are done, that can be done on any piece of property. You could do that with your own lot if you were trying to do. Beyond that, that's when the site development plans have to come with the true, like you see for the church, with the detailed engineering and architectural plans.
Brent, would that likely be a part of the terms of their purchase or their sale of the ground?
Most
This be
likely.
replatted into two sections, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, pardon my ignorance and confusion, the comments that residents have about actually what is developed on a residential side are not covered tonight?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, they did not bring that forward.
We're not considering that tonight.
Okay, so that'll be another notice to discuss that another time.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Tim Cernan, 5213 Hopewell Court. Last night, we were at the city council meeting. And so one of the things was brought up that we can bring up conditions for the area. They said that we couldn't do it at that time. But for us on at Century Heights 19, I'm requesting, and I think my neighbors are probably on board with the 30 foot, if we could have a berm instead of the trees. And so I know at one of these meetings, it was brought up that we would have to go to the developer and have that discussion or request with them. But if I understand it correctly, planning and zoning can put that condition on this. And if we could, seeing some of the other developments with townhomes, it looks like there's a 10-foot berm on Middle Road across from the fire station. That was a windmill development. So I guess that's kind of what I'm looking for, and I think my neighbors probably would feel the same way, but I'd leave that up to them. But that would be my request for tonight, and if we're able to bring that request to the commission.
Your request is noted.
Yeah, as far as an actual condition, that would have to go towards the site development plan when that comes forward. So the final plat can only specify legal dimensions and easements, which is the image you have up in front of you. So let's assume that they come back next month with that Brian, I don't know if you have an idea, probably next month is when we'll see the site development plan. I realize it's a lot of moving steps. That's where those conditions would actually be considered by planning and zoning for that case, not for the final plat.
Thank you.
But I do think it's good
Yes,
to
absolutely.
make that comment tonight, Tim, so that it gives people a heads up that this is coming, that this is a request that you'd like to make. Better to put it out in front of the conversation than at the time of the conversation.
Yeah, we can still include it in the record, and it will still be included in the record, so it will be noted, as the chairman said.
And you're all aware, we just can't actually attach that to a condition
To that
yet,
legal
quite
document.
yet.
And that's where I was a little confused last night with the city council when they were talking about it in the first development area they were talking about on conditions. And so that's where I was a little confused and just wanted clarification.
Thank you.
Butcher that last name.
Yes, sir.
So, along the lines of giving a heads up and basically setting the stage for the next appearance, is it still appropriate to make other requests tonight for the actual development of the buildings on the residential side? Or should we wait?
We'll, in order to maybe have the next meeting not go till 10 o'clock, go ahead.
All right, thank you, and appreciate the time to present this to you again. I am one house away from the north end of Butterfield, which is the southern border of this plot in front of us tonight, and basically the northern end of Fieldstone Point. So just a brief moment of background to get to a request that I'll make in a minute. One of the city's points to promote the R3 development was to fulfill the longstanding plan to eventually continue Fieldstone Point north to Hopewell. All the residents surrounding this plot, some of which are here tonight, agree that for us, the most beneficial way to do this is to continue the development as it is today, which is high-end single-family properties. The sharp contrast between the existing $600,000 to $700,000 homes and the proposed $250,000 homes is stark. And we're talking about 3-4-car garage homes right next to single-car garage homes. And so we feel this is not a reasonable extension of the development called Fieldstone Point. And just to address the much-debated property devaluation topic that's gone on in several meetings now, every realtor we've spoken with agrees that the value of higher-end homes will drop to get buyers willing to pay that much money to live to homes, next to homes, 1/3 the value, and that's just the reality of it. So the city states that the intention is to provide a step change from one neighborhood to the next, but a step change from $600,000 to $700,000 homes would be something in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. Going down to $200,000 homes is really not a step, that's a cliff. However, be that as it may, we understand this land will be developed, and if R3 condos are a done deal, as it seems to be, then those of us on Butterfield Court would request a consideration from you to help provide what we feel is the best reasonable solution for everyone. We would trust that the city leaders would aim to provide the most beneficial solution for everyone. We would ask for a slight tweak to the proposed plan to keep the new lower-priced neighborhood more distinct from the existing higher-priced one. More distinct than a few pine trees and some kind of buffer boundary. That sounds nice, but it really doesn't accomplish that. And we know this has been a sore subject in previous forums, but we would ask that the Butterfield be kept from joining these two drastically different developments together. In other words, keep the new development as a closed loop off of Hopewell, and keep Butterfield as a dead end. I know the dead end phrase seems to give the city in particular heartburn, but there is a precedent for it in the city in several places already. And if you can just allow me to make a few points about it, I think we can make some progress. The city has indicated several times in these hearings that Butterfield was always intended to extend north. Okay, we get it. But other than being a preferential thing, we're not sure why this is necessary. The people living in the new development, pictured here, have no reason to drive south through Fieldstone Point. Their fastest access to main roads is Hopewell to the north. The people on Butterfield can access Hopewell, as they have for years, via Remington, just 1 block away. No big deal. Delivery and refuse vehicles can do what they've easily done for years and back up or turn around to serve the homes at the dead end. The city has also mentioned better emergency service access to Butterfield, but we have indicated to this commission before that a time study shows that the original route from 53rd up through Berkshire and Remington takes only 20 seconds longer than coming through the proposed new road. And just a few seconds longer if going from Hopewell down to Remington. Again, it's really a non-issue. So, in summary, if continuing Butterfield is not critical, and I think we've shown that it's not, can a consideration be taken to at least limit the property devaluation of your current residents and look at making this small alteration to the overall development plan? The condos can still be built, and the various development goals the city has listed can still be achieved. The goals are admittedly beneficial, and what we're requesting doesn't impact any of them. Actually, dare I say it, doing this may give the developer the chance to place an additional higher-end unit on the southern perimeter of the property, which they would certainly welcome. Again, the most beneficial outcome for everyone. In the grand scheme of things, it's not asking for very much, really, and your current residents can come away with trusting that their concerns mean something to city leaders. So, we'd respectfully request that you give this some serious consideration and seek a way to make it possible. And we appreciate your oversight on the many things you have on your plate right now, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. All right, do we have anyone else that would like to make any comments or have any questions regarding the plat or the site development plan for the church?
Hi, my name's Wendy Clifton. I'm at 5323 Hopewell Court. I always have to apologize for this voice. It's not my normal voice, so bear with me. Tim Cernan brought something up last night that I think is really worth discussing as we move forward in this process. And that is, as the developer is getting ready to put that site plan together, how do we become part of the process rather than just having it presented to us so that we can work together with that developer and we all can have a say in what this is going to look like and everybody gets input? Is this something that's ever been done? And if it's not, can we be creative enough to do that? That would be my question to the board.
Well, I can let Mark answer part of this, but I will tell you that from my experience, the developers usually hold some meetings and they welcome your input. They're not always going to do what you want, but they do welcome your input. Mark?
Yeah, so, you know, the only thing I can control is city code.
Right.
City code does not require neighborhood meetings. It requires them to follow state and city law relative to rezoning, plating, and site plans. We did ask this developer to do a neighborhood meeting, which they did on their own volition. I did attend it. As citizens, you are welcome to contact, deal, make agreements with each other as you wish. That is not something that I'm part of. I'm not a referee. That's something that citizens can do on their own. You can also always contact your alderman if you have concerns about zoning or code or things that are going on in your neighborhood.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we could reach out directly to the developer and request a meeting with that developer
Yes.
to work together on a site plan rather than just having it presented to us. That's an option.
Well, just so we understand, it's up to them to bring a
Understood,
site plan
understood,
forward.
but we have that privilege to be able
If
to
you want
do
some
that.
input, I would give them a call
Sure.
and see what they'll do for you.
Okay.
I would
and,
just add to that, and as much as we appreciate you making these suggestions tonight and getting that in the record and addressing things you'd like to see happen and saying that tonight, even though that's not going to be decided on tonight, you've got it on record. That doesn't preclude you from it. It was going to be my exact suggestion, is you're on record here with us and we're only can do so much. Be talking to the developer anyway. Have those conversations. And then as you bring these up to our next meeting, it'd be great for an update. And if those things are happening, I would also suggest that you bring your suggestions without rehashing things that have already been asked and answered. and focus on moving forward based on council decision last night and where we were last month. So bringing new ideas, new conversations to the podium is much appreciated by the commission.
If I can ask one other question that maybe relates to this and maybe doesn't, but at least it puts it out there for the board to be thinking about, or the committee. I don't know how to refer to you. I'm very sorry. I don't understand the government very well. What is to stop? Okay, we're talking about units that are $200,000 to $300,000. What is to stop any person or company out there from purchasing a group of them and turning them into rentals? Is there a zone, is there an ordinance for that? Is there so there's nothing to stop that from occurring, is that what I'm hearing and seeing?
There's not. I'll make the same comment I made at the last meeting. The developer in this case is probably one of the better developers in the area. And I would actually be surprised if these are under 300,000. My guess is they're probably going to be higher, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. I appreciate your honesty and I appreciate you hearing our questions. Thank you.
I also remember hearing that in our last meeting in regards to price for the units, that they were gonna be closer to 4.
I'm not sure the windmillers build anything under 3.
Less than
Or
400,000.
less than 400,000, really.
Yeah.
Those are
But-
the peripheral units, not the
Correct.
At the
Yeah.
internal.
townhouses.
Yeah.
And-
So, but that's next meeting, if it comes next meeting.
Right.
So, but thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
One more question, I'm sorry. Today we talked about 028 and 029, but last time we were here, we talked about 018. How does 018 and 028 and 029, that was what was presented last week, and now we don't even hear about it. I'm trying to understand how they fit together. Like, how do they correlate together?
Right, so the
Right.
cases are just numbered, so there's no secret there. The cases are just numbered sequentially as they come in. The rezoning case was the 18th case received, or the 19th case, whatever the number was, by the city on that date. That was a rezoning case. Now there's a site development plan case. It gets its own number. It's just sequential. It's just,
So will there potentially be a change in numbers again? I mean, because
Right,
we're
so-
looking
so
out
the-
for this stuff.
Yeah.
the second site development plan or.
Yeah,
the
there
other
will
half
be a
would have
different
another
case number. for the
All right,
next time.
thank you, I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments regarding this? Yes, sir.
Hi, Tony Clifton, 5323 Hopewell Court. Just a question on the church side of the floodplain.
Yes, sir.
The only thing on the west side of that floodplain will be the church and its parking lots. Is that all?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's it, thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay. Any additional questions from the commission?
No.
Okay, then.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I will make a recommendation for approval of case 23028, the replatting, subject to staff recommendations. And I would just make a note about recommendation 2, that the site development plan is required, and that's part of the recommendations.
Yes. Okay, we need a second.
I'll second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, that motion carries. How about the site development plan?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of case 23-029, the site development plan for Lot 1 of Hopewell Farm Second Edition, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
All right. Suppose I should ask, do we have any comments before we go on and vote on this?
I guess I felt like we kind of talked about it, but maybe we
Okay.
can.
I thought we were rolling together and then vote. Yeah.
We're all good, okay. No problem. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. All right. Now we have case 23-036, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is for Lot 1 of Creek Ridge Estates, Third Edition. It's accessed by coming up State and then going up 39th Street, and then you have Creek Hill Drive here, which is the means of access back into a great deal of this development. The area is zoned R5 High Density Residence District, or High Density Multifamily Residence District. We have C3 General Business District here, and then south of State Street, we have the I2 General Industrial District. This is urban high intensity, the land use, commercial, community commercial along here, and then industrial. So you essentially have this transitioning to even higher use, higher trafficked area right here. This has been zoned R5 for over 20 years, this area. The plat subdivision involved is essentially this lot here. This lot has already been built, Lot 2, with duplex development. This area here at one time was anticipated to be multifamily and replicate the buildings that were already on site. What we have are 18 townhouse units, stormwater detention, and then the utilities running throughout. Each of these units has its own garage, and then there will be a space out in front for the parking. This area here has to be kept free and clear except for the parking that is provided here. You have your dumpster here, means of access vis-a-vis private drive coming through here. The density requirement has been met as each of these units, per the land space, you have 3,500 square feet of land per each unit. 3,000 is what is the minimum required. Let's give you an idea of what these will look like. The petitioner's engineer subsequently has emailed us and told us that the petitioner would like to make these 2-story now instead of 3-story. The petitioner has provided the necessary landscaping within the confines of the development. Petitioner has also received a variance to reduce this side yard setback as well, from 21 feet down to 7.5 feet. And that was at last week's Board of Adjustment meeting. Give you a comparison here. This is the current development with 18 units. What was proposed for this site, the last site plan, was for these same buildings here with 16 units in each. Now this is a duplex right here. This is subdivided. These 2 buildings here essentially are going to be replaced by these 18 units here. So what you have is about 1,968 square feet of land area per unit as opposed to 3,500 square feet per unit with this type development here. This is far more dense than this. And these units here have all been built out in a manner that is far more dense than what the petitioner is proposing. Give an idea of how these look. Again, these are the townhouses that were proposed as 3 stories and now have potential to be reduced to 2. And these are what was proposed for this portion of the subdivision. These 2 right here are examples of over basically 4 stories, maybe even higher, in what had been proposed for this site initially. Staff, in reviewing the proposal, would make a recommendation for approval with the conditions that are listed in the report and make sure that the provisions that are there for solid waste collection and snow removal shall be the responsibility of the owners of the particular townhouse units, that no parking shall be permitted in the drive area to create a circulatory pattern. Private hydrant shall be required on site, and that the water purification measures or the detention basin are approved by city engineer prior to the certificate of occupancy being issued. I would ask, are there any questions?
I have a question. Go ahead. Greg, you're talking about square footage, but that was based on a 3-story unit. So now we're looking at 2-story units. We don't know what the square footage is.
The square footage is based on a per unit level. So that what we're saying is the land area that has to be provided, this is the density factor that is used for
Okay,
this.
so the footprint's the same.
So the footprint, yeah. So what you're looking at is the number of units on site, and each unit has to have at least 3,000 square feet allocated to it based on the size of the lot. So the size of
That's
the
not
lot
changing.
would have to be, it'd have to be at least 54,000 square feet. This lot is 63,000 square feet in size. So what the developer is providing is greater space per each unit in total on this lot than is required, 500 more square feet than is required.
And are these going to be rental units, or are they going to be?
They're privately owned,
sold?
is from what I understand.
Okay.
Hey, Greg, it's Roy. Can you give me a little more explanation about why there's no parking in the middle? And I'm understanding you to say there's no street parking at all. And are these single car driveways or double car driveways?
These, I believe, are single-car driveways. The parking, there are some spaces that will be allocated in the middle. Each of these units meets the requirements with indoor and outdoor parking for the number of spaces required. And the spaces in the interior are extra. They all meet the parking requirements
How many?
within our ordinance.
How many parking spaces are in the middle?
I believe there are 3 to 4. The dumpster's been put in there. There was a prior design that we'd seen that showed it, I believe, as 4 at most.
That makes sense. It's 37 feet, so if there were 9-foot spaces, that'd give you 36, so that's about right. But it's kind of odd, they show the dumpster opening where the parking space is going to be. That, to me, should be
How do you
facing the
access it?
driveway. Right. Are they precluded, Greg, from putting any more parking in the middle? I'm just thinking, even if they meet code, just from a functionality standpoint, one-way traffic, no parking in the street, single driveway, and there's like nowhere else to park except 4 spaces out of 18 units. Nobody can have a friend over for sure.
I don't think they are precluded. Would be a fire department issue on maneuverability would be the limiting factor. But there's a potential here for more parking that could be added.
Yeah, on the center island could hold more parking. That wouldn't be a fire issue. Just, we don't want people parking on the drive lane. Again, that's not right of way, that's a drive lane or driveway. But we don't want that to be blocked by cars if there's emergency.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it doesn't even look like there's enough room between any of the driveways to physically park a car either.
Yeah, so you get credit for one inside the garage, one in the driveway. That's how they get 2
Yeah.
at the unit plus the center island parking, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Well,
Yes, go ahead.
yeah.
Is there any ordinance that says there has to be any kind of parking for the site beyond what's provided for the tenants? So this is really a moot
They
point.
meet the parking requirement as it's listed in the ordinance.
All right.
So no friends allowed.
I'm choosing my words very carefully. This is a unique neighborhood. Where the condos are is a totally different type of development than the apartments as you approach this site. So is it our feeling that this is housing that's more in line with the condos, or is it more in line with the apartments?
Private ownership is what's anticipated, and this is less dense than either one. It's less dense than what's existing in the privately owned condo area. Those buildings are far larger, contain more units, and this right now is actually less dense than what was proposed if we go back to what was done in 2006.
We looked at this a long time ago.
I think you're talking the question about compatibility with the
Right, I'm
surrounding
looking,
pattern
that's a
development.
very good word. And I'd also like you to show me, Greg, maybe on the aerial, as these townhouses are built in there, how do they align with the existing apartments on that kind of a western border?
Here's where the townhouses would be, and
Okay.
then there's the duplex right there. And then these are all of the multifamily
Okay,
structures. There's like
so we have
6
a
of them.
wooded area there that's a buffer.
Wooded area here.
But that is still
that
technically a
could be used
developable
for
lot.
development
I did
and
hear from that
here as well.
developer this week. So he does have plans for it at some point, potentially.
The same person as building the townhouses?
Separate.
No,
Different owner.
separate ownership.
And the same with, there's a lot to the north. That's, okay.
So one of the things we think about just as planners is we don't, and code doesn't allow us to differentiate between an owner-occupied unit or a renter-occupied unit. I could rent out my house tonight if I wanted to.
Sure.
So there's no real for us, for planners to really know. So looking at compatibility from an ownership standpoint is always hard. So we look at, fit and finish, if you will. And the site complies. I think the pattern of development does have both apartments and condominiums in it, so I would think it's compatible.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
I'm just curious if the developer wants to talk about the parking at all. Does they have any comment?
Okay. All right. Is the developer available?
Busy guy.
Yes, he is.
Hi, Brian Belk, Axiom Consultants. Again, engineer representing the developer. He is not here tonight, but to be honest with you, I think there was some confusion between us and the comments received from the city. We originally had, I want to say, 5 angled parking stalls there within that island. That was prior to the trash enclosure being there. One of the comments was related to no parking in the drive lane. We thought that was referring to inside the drive lane. So that was the change we made that you're seeing here, was to integrate that trash enclosure there. I have no issues with adding some parking stalls. I don't believe the developer does either, and or delineating those a little better than what's shown now with that trash enclosure. So there was a little bit of confusion on our end on that, so.
So you thought you were taking them out for us, and now we're asking you to put them back in?
Right. It was just,
Sorry about that.
miscommunication, certainly on our end, so. Yeah, I don't believe the developer has any issues with that as some overflow guest parking scenario in this case. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address this case?
Hi, my name is Brian Dugan. I and my wife and I have a condo in Creek Hills, Creek Ridge Apartments, or not apartments, condos. And we've been there about 6 years, and we've seen a number of changes that have gone on in the neighborhood. One of the things that has happened is that we've noticed that differences in the way that people behave from one end of 39th down to where the condos are at. Right now, it's been pretty quiet. During the summers, things keep kind of heat up a little bit. When we first moved there, we had a lot of folks from the apartments coming on down and asking if they couldn't swim in the swimming pool, which belongs to the condos. And of course, they had to be generally told that sorry, it's a private pool, and they were compliant. I don't know if we ever had to have the police come. Do you know, Mary? On that issue. Okay, but it was a problem, and I can foresee that if we have more people that are going to be between the two areas, we're going to have more movement in that direction. It'll get to be tighter. One question I have for you is, you said this was a high-density area. What is the limit on the number of people we can have in this 2.5 block area? Just, Creek Hills, it has 64 condos and average of 2 people per condo, so that's 128 people just in the condos. And there are 9 rental units, and I'm guessing either 8 or 12 units in each one of those. And They're not always filled, but there's a lot of people there. So we're getting near the point where the area is so congested that we do, from time to time, see police cars sitting right there between the two areas, especially in the summers. And I don't want this to become a ghetto. I like the place, I like the people there, and we're pretty peaceful right now. But putting in more housing there, I think is a really big mistake. So that's my, my sermon.
Thank you.
Hi,
They could
my
have-
name is Audrey Dugan. I live at 4102 Creek Hill Drive. He is indeed my husband. Tonight, still, yeah. We have lived there almost 7 years. And like he says, it's a nice place to live. People get along. We've had to put up no parking, no private parking allowed or something of that sort to protect our parking areas that are in front of each building. And then the condos to the east of us, Timber Creek condos, they've done the same. They particularly have a parking problem. And they tend to park, or have been forced to park if they cannot get in their lot, on the north side of Creek Hill Drive. The south side of Creek Hill Drive is no parking. That's not our decision, that's the law. So where the extra friends and whatever from these new buildings will park, I don't know. But it won't be there because the street is too narrow. My husband had a heart attack a couple of years ago. We needed that fire truck there. They can't have a hard time getting there. So, I listened to the last meeting online because I wasn't here, obviously. And it seemed like no one understood the history of the area or I guess the connection that we have to the area. You said there's more space to the north behind us. Yeah, Duck Creek. Devil's Glen Park is across the creek. So that's all nice view and space, but it's not space we can use. And the space that they have purchased, I assume, for the, whether it's rental or condos, I certainly have a strong opinion about that because we have a rental problem on 39th and just around the corner of Creek Hill. They, except for Mr. Richardson property, the rest are pretty techy. And I hope I haven't offended anyone from there. So that's it. This has all been green space and beautiful for the 7 years or more that I've been here. And now whoever, sir, wants to tear down all the greenery. And I certainly hope there's plenty of adequate landscaping or saving of any edge of the greenery. So it's nice. We can all get along if it's nice, but not if it's nice. I mean, not if it's not. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to point out, Mr. Chairman, that there could be 3 more units on this site for the density requirement.
Yep.
Down the street, across the street. Oh, for Christ's sake. Hi, I'm Mary Jo Rutherford. I'm president of the Creek Ridge Board of Directors. I spoke the last time. My biggest concern is safety. That's my concern the most. I'm retired from the hospital. I know how much it is important to have people there to take care of people when they are ill. We have a lot of elderly people in our 4 condos, and therefore, I am very concerned about the traffic. We have one way in and one way out. That is the biggest problem. And when you start construction on that, it is gonna be a mess. We're gonna have trucks sitting everywhere. Not only that, if you have no parking in there for people that are gonna visit, they will be on the street. They park on the street now, from down at the apartments and across the way at those other condos. And I think our safety is worth a lot more than tax dollars for getting this done. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to butt back in. I did want to make a point about traffic. There have been 2 serious accidents at the corner of 39th and State Street in the last 7 years. In one case, an elderly woman was killed. That's all.
Yes, sir.
Hello. My name is Ron Libby. I live at 4024 Creek Hill Road. I may be repeating some of the things that have already been said. I'm sorry. I do. Find some place to dip my cane. I've got a few things I want to bring up, and I wrote them down here so I wouldn't forget them. Some of you heard, there's 6 buildings designed with 16 condos each and designed for 2 cars each. That's altogether about 192 possible cars just in those 6. That's not taking into account visitors' cars. 10 additional units with 140 rental or condo apartments, each with 2 cars each. At 280 cars or less maximum. It's probably less than that at any one time. But once again, that's not taking into account visitors' cars. There's 1 duplex with a possible 2 cars each, that's 4 cars. That's a total of a maximum of 476 possible cars driving on this street with no parking on one side of the street. At the present time, there are a few construction vehicles and pull-behind trailers parked out on and off of the residential apartment areas below, towards State Street. The present street coming in off of State Street is about 30 feet wide. Standard car is about 6.5 to 8 feet wide. Subtract 8 feet from the curb, that leaves you, not to mention the wider construction vehicles parked along, leaves you about 20 feet of passing room for traffic each way, with that no parking on one side. Passing room is fair in fair weather. It's tight, especially at the curved section of the street. In winter, it's very close, with usually 1 car having to wait for the other one to come through. Now developers are wanting to put more condos, townhouses now, off the same street. I've got nothing against the developer, and I'm sure they're great people and they know what they're doing. They could probably build this thing. But would add many more vehicles to that traffic situation that we already have. Maybe up to 90 more vehicles, possibly up to 180, depending on how many cars are going to be in each unit and the visitors that are going to be there. Add to this traffic scenario school buses, children crossing the street, which happens all the time, U.S. Mail, FedEx, USP delivery trucks, moving vans, fire trucks, and occasional plumbing, electrical repair type vehicles. And by building this, I feel you would be exasperating an already tight traffic condition. This was probably back in, say, 2006. It was planned for high density, and there was going to be probably condos built there. Same as at the end of the cul-de-sac. But thank God we've had that many years to experience what would be without those buildings being there. My God, if they were there, we'd really have a mess. So hindsight, looking back at it, is a lot better foresight looking forward. And then remember, as it's been brought up, there's only one way in and one way out of that whole situation. One way in, one way out. How many more cars can you cram into there that are going to be utilizing that one street with one way in and one way out? There comes a time when you have to realize maybe it's just too dense. Possibly, maybe instead of townhouses, I know they want to make money, everybody does. Maybe, like the duplexes and stuff there. I don't know, like, there's one built down there now, but, and I sure would like to have something done with that land because it looks like heck right now. But, you know, that's whole nother problem. But please consider that. You're gonna exasperate an already tight situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'm at the right time now.
Yes, I think you are.
I'm going to make it real short. I would hope that the committee would go to the site before this plan gets approved. We own the villas there. I call it villas or townhouse. Then maybe the committee will be able to see, and maybe they could continue with the same thing we have there. There would be maybe another additional 3 or 4 that would only bring like maybe 8 cars to 10 cars there. That's what I'm asking for it. And that's about it. Yeah, I would hope that the committee would accept that to go to the job site before they approve the plan that's requested from the developer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Joe Solas, and I live at 4002 Creek Hill. I was at the last meeting, so this has been a bit of an education. I understand the process, I think. I understand the bureaucracy, and I have to reiterate the process of just communicating what we're trying to do, whose interests are being served. And dare I say, you can't fight City Hall. I think we all get that. So it feels like this is all but a done deal. I realize that it's not, but it sure feels that way. And rather than rehashing the numerics that Ron pointed out with the parking and that type of thing, that's accurate. It's hypothetical, but it's accurate. And like Mary Jo said, it's a concern of ours, seeing the traffic that's coming in and out of there, and there's only one way in and out. There's nowhere to go because we're on Duck Creek. There can't be any expansion without all kinds of litigation and commercial, changing proper labeling and what have you in order for that circle drive to go away. So we would actually have another way in and out of there, but we don't. And that's one of the reasons we moved there. The drawing that we were looking at that apparently has been amended or could be amended for 5 vehicles parked in the circle drive into the intended development, that it makes no sense to me. I was looking at the drawing and thinking, where are we gonna park all these other cars, knowing how crowded and cramped it is already? And frankly, I think somebody just suggested maybe, go down and have a look. And fire trucks need to get in and out of there, emergency vehicles, and not to mention all the other, the commercial vehicles that come in, the post office, the FedEx, and that's already been said. But that's a big concern. It's a nice, quiet neighborhood. And again, I mentioned that I've gotten an education about what the city considers high density, residential, because they definitely got it right in that area. There's also, as you know, there's a big difference between the the condo complex and the 4 buildings there. There, of course, there are 64 units. It's under the building garage parking, works out great. We have enough parking for the residents there. Of the 64 units, they're not all full, but I'm gonna say, and I don't know this for a fact, but it's safe to assume that 90% of the residents there are 2-vehicle, residents. They were referred to as family units. It's retirees there. There's not a lot of kids. We kind of like it that way. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but we kind of like it that way. The buildings the older dilapidated apartments on the way in up 39th and on Creek Hill, that's probably the nicest way to put it. They're old design, dilapidated apartments with high resident turnover. There's been abandoned cars there, and like Ron mentioned, now we've got guys that drag their construction trailers. They're parked on the street, on the north side of the street. Put 6 inches of snow there, and we got a problem. And I get it, I get it. These are all hypotheticals, and they are temporary, but that's still impediment data that needs to be taken into consideration before this new 4-building unit, it actually happens. Anyways, like I said, I feel like you can't fight City Hall, and it feels like it's all but a done deal. I hope it's not. I really do. And it's not because I'm against prosperity and commercialism and developers. That's not it. I just hope that this doesn't happen in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question.
Sure.
Please consider going there before this plan gets approved. That's the only request, and I hope that it's considerate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He repeated himself.
One more person here.
Hi, I'm Christine Demink. I'm also at Creek Hill, or are we going Creek Ridge? Estates. I'm at 4018, and I've been there about 1.5 years. And I just realized when we were talking about the traffic and stuff, and we talk about the bottleneck and the congestion, it is dangerous, as Mary Jo said. I was going to work one morning, because I'm one of the few that's not retired in that area, and I was stuck behind 5 vehicles waiting because an ambulance was on 39th Street and they had nowhere else to go. And the person obviously needed medical attention. It was 15 minutes. We had nowhere to get out. We're stuck there. And so we sat there for 15 minutes, and some people were trying to go through the parking lots. There's no exit to get out. They couldn't get even through the apartments. So it is bad, and it is dangerous. And it's, it's, when you're gonna try to throw that many more homes in that area and cars in that area, it is the safety that's what's really important. And that curve that goes around, when they were talking about, it's dangerous. There's been no accidents at that curve at 39th, but you can't see when someone's parked there on the curve, you can't see someone coming up the hill unless it's at night, when you can see the headlights. So when someone's parked on that north side, there's only one lane, and so it's risky. But the ambulance really impacted me when I thought about that. I thought, there is no only one way in or out. And the person obviously needed, medical attention more than I need to be at work on time. But, it's a problem. And so I guess coming to look at it is maybe a good idea for you guys to see. It's a tricky neighborhood, it really is. So the development of the other lots is gonna really impact negatively as far as the traffic and the safety is concerned. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Just for the record, I have been up in that neighborhood and I have seen it.
So have I.
There we go.
My name is Michael Galvin. I'm at 4032 Creek Hill Drive. I appreciate you folks helping us out here. I know how well remunerated you are for doing all this work. And I'm another member of the NIMBY coalition here. And I do want to say, you kids get off of our yard. The way these condos that we're in were designed were not only to have one parking space underneath, but then plenty of parking out front. Although I know it barely clears the ordinance as far as having somebody park in their driveway and in the garage in front, you know how well that's going to work. And people are going to be trying to park on that road, and they're going to be trying to park right next to the no parking signs because they know nobody's going to come up and give them a ticket. I think you're really asking for trouble to have cars on both sides of that road parked, especially when there's emergency, especially when there's snow. If they could, and I understand you're putting fewer actual units up there, that's awesome, but you don't have enough parking. And it's just going to be a mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to say something, Mark?
Chairman, we're listening as you are and just looking at options, trying to find ways to address citizens' concerns here. And I think Axiom, when they got up and spoke, talked about there is room to put more parking in. The subdivision was designed the way it was designed. That is not ideal. We probably wouldn't design a subdivision that way now with today's standards and today's planning and engineering knowledge that we have. Like Vogel Court doesn't come all the way through. If that did, you'd have another way out. Vogel Court's to the west, if you will. There's things that we can't change. They're privately owned properties that are in the way now. But you could, and I think add parking, and I think the petitioner would be willing to do that from what their own engineer said. And so I think we should, task staff with, if you will, to address that additional parking and how that might be increased on that center island. And so that it doesn't affect fire access. I don't think it will, but I think we need to probably look at doubling that or increasing it to some factor. I don't have a number. I can't do analysis on the fly, but I think that's something staff can work on and can take back to the developer, and they seem amenable to it.
Thank you. Roy, I can tell your mute's off. Do you have something to say?
No, well, I agree with what everybody said, and that was my first concern, was the lack of parking, but the technical issue is that it meets the code. And that's something we encounter on a frequent basis, that the given development matches or meets the code requirements, and we have no real legal basis on which to say no. But that doesn't mean it looks good or we like it. So I feel compelled to say yes, but in reality, the last gentleman that got up, I completely agree. One car parked behind another one in a single car garage is dysfunctional, period. It is congested up there. I've also been up there multiple times and looked at it, and it wouldn't be the place that I'd want to try and find a parking place a lot of times. But that being said, it does meet our code, and that's our standard. But I think the representation that we're going to work with the developer, and they've indicated a willingness to address that, the more user-friendly it is for the developer, I'll say the more user-friendly it is, the easier it is to sell for the developer. If it's a place that doesn't work because the parking is horrible, it makes it harder to sell. So he has a vested interest in trying to do it as best he can, not just for the other neighbors, but for himself as well.
Thank you, Roy. And I completely agree with that. If the parking isn't there for those individuals, they're not likely to buy that. That doesn't help with your street issue, and it doesn't help with what you have when you drive up and down 39th Street. But if these are for sale units, which is what our understanding is they're going to be, they're not going to be able to sell them if folks can't park there. So,
Mr. Chair, can I throw
Yes.
something, a couple of things to that? As Mark just said, and him and I were kind of discussing, I think, to Brian's point, I think staff would be supportive if you did condition this to additional parking. I'm doing a little on-the-fly engineering here with the drawing. It looks like they did have 5 angle parking spaces on the initial. If we went back to that layout, I can see that they could add another 10, maybe 12 on the other 2 legs. So there is the room to be able to increase that. In terms of 39th and Creek Hill, we did get a request probably 3 weeks ago, somewhere in there, and I passed it along to the police department. I want them to take a look first, but specific to the curve, about changing that to no parking on both sides. So it may have been one of the residents that was here that had requested that. It starts with the PD. It'll ultimately probably come back to me, but that is in the works to have that evaluated. And I worked on this development previously in my life. I know the area as well, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think there are a few things that could be mitigated here.
Could you speak a little bit about construction when that takes place, what their requirements will be for parking their vehicles?
So the biggest thing with, to keep in mind with this street is that it's 31 feet back to back. That's the same width that any new neighborhood street is built at. Obviously, we're more used to single family as opposed to, multifamily. But they do have to maintain emergency access, but we have heard from Assistant Chief Sade, who's not here tonight, that was probably that exact situation of the ambulances. And so it's clearly far from ideal. But it's in the forefront for public safety, I can tell you that. There's not much I can do from an engineering perspective, unfortunately. The street is there, but the no parking and maybe some of the suggestions on the site plan, I think we can look at and work on.
How about during the construction, though, regarding the construction crew, the construction?
They have to, so there is actually, I probably don't want to say this because I think for their reference, I think it works more to their benefit, but there is actually parking allowed on both sides of Creek Hill Drive. So there's 3 no parking signs on the south side as you come around the curve. Where that last one is on the east, that's the end of the no parking zone. There is parking allowed on the south side. I think for your benefit, I think you'd all probably hope that no one realizes that so that you can maintain the parking only on the one side. But those crews would technically be allowed to use that by city code. I just looked up what are the no parking zones and what are not.
Thank you. Okay, hang on just a moment. Go ahead, Lynn.
They just have to make sure
Go ahead.
The additional parking, I guess, checks one box, but the concern, and I think it's valid, is additional parking just means more cars and we're still one way in and one way out.
Yep.
So this is not a rezoning, the density is determined already. That's there, right?
Yes,
But, and parking is determined by that density, but do we have in city code anywhere, in a situation where it's one way in and one way out, even a very valid safety issue? When are we too dense? Is there code tied to a road like this?
No, and then ultimately, I think we'd get to a matter of we have to let somebody develop their property. Ideally, it would not be developed, I'm sure, but we don't have that.
At some point, it becomes a taking, right? If we say this property can no longer be developed in the city because of some reason, the city's gonna have to pony up.
And it's also very difficult to categorize traffic that's generated from what should be a standard use. Let's say if a single family home, you expect 2 to 3 vehicles. All you gotta do is drive up and down their street, unfortunately, and you have probably fairly small apartments, specifically on 39th Street, that have multiple vehicles, and we don't have a way to regulate that.
Thank you. Before you folks go over there, let's just kind of summarize this a little bit. At least from my perspective, if we move forward, this will have a condition where there will be as many additional parking spaces on site. So just so you know that. We can't do anything about the streets right now. However, the police department's going to look at the corner to see whether or not there's no parking on either side. This is zoned for something much denser than what's in front of us. I know nobody wants to hear that, but it is. So from our perspective, we're kind of glad to see something less dense than what could be there because of the issues. Have I missed anything on summarizing this?
No.
Okay. With that, we do want to give you the right to speak, so go ahead.
My name is Robert Reed Azel. I live at 4185 Creek Hill Drive in Building 3. And my observations, having lived there for 7 years, is that the corner coming up and going to the right, going to the east, is not wide enough. In fact, on the north side, there's trees that are within 15 inches of the curb that need to be cut back and sliced back. And there's a lot of people that live in the apartments that face the north side of Creek Hill. Those apartments are constructed so that the people coming out of their apartment door want to go to that street to park their car. That's why they park there. There's a parking lot behind each building that they could park in, but they don't. And that's an obstruction. So that could be, that's one reason why I'm saying what I'm saying.
Thank you. Brent, is there any requirements on foliage, how close to the street it can be?
Yeah, we've got some city code requirements that Mark and I were just discussing, and I have no idea the history behind that, but the piece that he was referring to is actually owned by the city.
Okay, then, you're in the right place to
Even
mention
more
that.
so, a reason that we'd be able to do some tree clearing on there, which is
I used to
usually not
work
the
in
case.
some of those buildings as a utility person.
Mm-hmm.
And working in that, I would have to go in the front door because the back door couldn't go out to the parking lot. If the parking lots were constructed so the people could get from their apartment to the parking lot, they could park back there, but they can't. They park in the front because that's the easiest way for them to get to their car.
Okay, well,
And then
thank
they
you.
park too far away from the curb, and that prohibits them getting the snow away and having adequate way in and out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Not much we can do about that, unfortunately, but it sounds like we can fix something on the trees. Okay. Yes, sir.
A real quick remark about the parking situation. There is no parking on one side of the street and on the other side of the street when you go around the curb.
Yep.
They
vary
so
from
you do,
side to
yeah, they
side,
vary.
yeah.
They go back and forth. So it's like I thought you said there was no parking on both sides of the street after you make the curb, but
No, they
there
do
is no
vary,
parking there.
correct.
Yeah, because there was a guy out there parked illegally now when I came out and I had to go around him, so, he's right. There's plenty of parking in those spaces with those apartments. I don't know why they're not using them. Maybe it's just laziness. I
You
don't
can
know.
often see that on the aerial images. At any given time, you can see 8, 10 cars on the road and lots of open spaces.
All right.
I know I'm a bore. But I do have one last comment. I heard it said over here that this is all according to code. I would like to say that this is Bettendorf, Iowa, not Davenport. We've lived in Davenport. So let's be like Bettendorf.
Thank you.
Why don't we ask the developer to do something different there? Instead of 18 units, maybe they could cut it down to some lesser, so we won't have that problem with the parking, and we won't have that problem with the traffic. And I'm still hoping that the committee would go there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody made a comment here that, this may not be an attractive, property once it's built. And like I says, the dilapidated apartments being the new neighbors, that's a valid point. And I would also like to say that even though you've made it clear that the plan is according to code, it's within spec, and that as it stands right now today, you don't have a legal leg to stand on to say you can't do it because of the parking situation. I get that. And I know that in order to change that, it would take a massive and elongated legal process. I understand that. But again, I'm glad that you guys are listening. We appreciate that you are listening and that you've acknowledged our concerns as being valid. And with that, I still hope that it doesn't happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anyone on the commission have any further questions or comments? Okay. Nope. Okay. All right. Last one. Go ahead.
Just one question. When will the next meeting be on the topic of the Creek Hill development?
It would go, if it's recommended tonight,
Mm-hmm.
either way, it's
Either way.
recommended. It would go to the next council meeting in June.
June 6th.
June
is the
6th.
date.
There you go. June 6th.
June 6th, city council meeting in this same location.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. You ready? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve case number 23-036, subject to staff recommendations and an increase of parking spaces by Axiom
To as many as,
to as many as possible to maximize for safety concerns.
right.
I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All those, any further discussion from this commission?
No.
No, okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Our next case, Mr. Chairman, is 20-030. It's Lot 3, Quail Ridge Point subdivision. It's a Vibrant Credit Union. It's this parcel right here. And the applicant is Downey Construction on behalf of Vibrant Credit Union. What they want to do is put in a building addition. The area right now is heavily commercial. You've got C3 up here, C2 in these violet areas, and then this is C1 surrounding the particular parcel in question. The land use, given its proximity to Belmont and Middle Road, is community commercial. The area behind it is UMI, so it's a graduated land use change to eventually ULI further to the east and then further to the south. This plat was done, Quail Ridge Point subdivision, in 1999, and this is the area outline right here is this lot, Lot 3, 1.552 acres. In 2012, the site development plan was approved by the City Council for the DHCU Credit Union site, which became Vibrant Credit Union. This is an outline of the building. The proposed area is 768 square feet is what is being proposed to be added on this side of the structure. First site plan shows you this area here, and then reworking of the parking pattern within the site. The entry will remain the same. This is another further site development plan showing the outline here again of the building, and then this is the addition right here. The elevations show the only alteration is occurring here on the south side. And there will be a drive-up window also for that service, and it's going to be transitioned into a more of a restaurant coffee shop type atmosphere from being just a credit union at the present time. Additional landscaping is being presented here as a part of the redevelopment. Staff, in reviewing this, would recommend approval of the site development plan with the conditions listed. I would ask, are there any questions?
Craig, is this basically, are they taking, the addition is sitting on top of the footprint of all the drive-throughs right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so they have the roof line there and they're enclosing it,
Pretty close, yep.
but there'll still be a drive-through, only for the coffee shop,
Only for the coffee shop.
not
yep.
for the credit union,
Not for the banking.
World is changing.
I guess. And then is there
Virtual banking and coffee
outdoor
shops.
seating? Or is there an outdoor area?
That was anticipated at one time, an area out here, but the redesign of this has led this to be more open area and green space. That was removed, that aspect, and there was another, and the actual footprint was reduced from what we originally were submitted.
Okay, thank you.
My concern is similar to what we were just talking about, that when you drive to the credit union right now, there's cars lined up on the road the entire time already. And in addition to the cars lined up on the road, parked from, I don't even know what business, you also have a line coming all the way out, down the street and out the street for the other coffee house that exists in that area.
But I think the clientele will be different.
Yeah.
Potentially, but the number of cars won't be.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought is are they going to be pilfering from the existing line of cars, or are they going to add more cars to it. Because if they're just taking from the cars that are already backed up,
Doubt it.
then it's not a big deal. But otherwise, we're adding that many more cars to get in and out of there in a morning or whenever it is.
All hours of the day.
Hard for us to know that. We did do a parking analysis. Greg and I kind of worked together, at least on the initial part of this, and we made them park it for the portion that's coffee shop. We made them park it for coffee shop, and the portion that's credit union or bank, financial service, we made them park it correctly for that. So they meet their code. This is a trend that's happening, that financial institutions, especially banks and credit unions, are trying to find ways to get people to come to their brick and mortar shops, because people don't do that anymore. I can do all my banking right here. I can apply for a loan, so that personal relationship with your banker has changed. So this is a way for them to entice people back. So I would posit, if you will, that they don't have a lot of traffic and they're just trying to actually get some traffic. So I don't know that there's gonna be a huge increase. That's
I would also
conjecture
look,
at
if
best,
you
I
look
guess.
at
queue.
this
How much-
aerial parking, the queue is long.
I was trying to
theirs.
find that actually. Which
It,
one
it
is
does,
it on?
it does have good stacking. Another thing to keep in mind, and Jeremy might be able to answer this for me, is the orthodontist next door open yet?
Is
So
what?
that was, if you remember the case that we had,
Turn on the other side.
a
Purple
year and a half
signage.
ago, we talked about all of this. And the queue that Janessa is talking to, right when you pull into the addition, was related to the dental building on the northeast side there. One of those doctors split off and built the building next door, which we thought was gonna help with that parking because they were so limited
The
on their own
on-street parking?
site that they were gonna,
They're parking on the
that they
street.
now have to park
Their staff parks on the
off-street
street.
now on their
Yeah.
own side. That hasn't quite happened yet. But yes, there is still always the possibility that we get a little bit of what we see at Atomic, but you do have, as Mark said, good stacking throughout this site. So internally, I would not anticipate the queuing, but the street will see more traffic potentially.
Whitey's needs to get this kind of queuing on their site.
No kidding.
That would be nice.
Especially if there's 90-cent cones right
Does
Starting to utilize that lot.
does this need to go, is the drive-through approved because it was the bank, so they don't have to, or do they need
No
to?
more
We
special,
don't have that provision anymore in the code.
Okay,
no more special use on drive-through, no special use on the patio, because it's not an alcohol service situation. This is not an alcohol serving patio. So just like a normal restaurant that just had a couple tables out front, you can do that without a special use permit.
So what I understood you saying, Brent, is that the current on-street parking is due to the dental office, which is now being,
Partially, yep. It was gonna
Enlarged.
divide some of that traffic.
That's not true. There's not enough parking.
You should use
Right
the.
now.
will you go to the podium for us, please, dear?
Down there.
Thank you.
Martha Schaefer, 3202 Belmont Place, which my backyard is attached to the Atomic Coffee Shop, which has so much, you can't even get to the bank on a Saturday. We'll just say that. Because there's no way of getting a car through there when they have people parked on both sides of the road trying to get to the Atomic Coffee right now. And my biggest concern is and the reason there's the orthodontist place that's originally there now, their employees park on that street. And when I checked the parking of the new building, there's not a whole lot of additional parking for other than maybe the doctor and of course their customers. Because you're still gonna have all these people parked on the street, which then obstructs the coffee shop now of getting their customers in and out. I mean, I was there on a Saturday just trying to pull some money out of the bank, and you can't get through. It was dead parking on both sides of the street. You can't get through. And you're just trying to use the business. Now, we've lost the exercise place in the one building. They left. So, that parking lot's being used by the coffee shop, people that work there now. And they also park on the street too, because they didn't leave any. They have a few parking spots, but they don't use them. It looks like maybe the owner might use it when he shows up every once in a while. And my biggest concern is, and I wish I was here when the bank went in, because that drive-through for the bank, the elevation of the parking lot is so high. I get all the lights in my house and my condo, that I have to keep my shade shut 24/7 because you get lights coming in from we got it from the coffee shop. You guys had them put up a partial fence, which didn't cover the whole thing. And now you're gonna have, more traffic come through in another coffee shop, which, I love their competition, but, the one Atomic, they put in the high octane coffee. So the kids, they just really love it. And there's people there, technically all the time. And my other biggest concern is the trash that we get. We were cleaning up yards. It's amazing. The cups, the cans, the straws, the trash, and nobody has a trash can out there for when they do a drive-through that maybe the customer can put their trash in there instead of throwing it out of their car. And next thing I know, I'm sitting here cleaning up my yard, the next people's yard. It just, there's no barrier. There's nothing there. And I notice, you guys talk about tree counts and stuff. Well, you landscape the side that's on Belmont Road, but I don't see any barriers or landscape between us and these businesses. There's none. So I don't kind of get that either. But, if they want to put a coffee shop in because they want to hit that competition, and those people at Atomic are doing pretty damn good. So, how they're going to fit that in with the drive-through, I don't know. They have enough parking spots there. We were saying in our neighborhood, why does the doctors have their staff call the bank and say, you don't have any people ever parking in your parking lot on the one side. Why don't you let our people park there and we'll just walk, across to work, or put in a little sidewalk over to our place. That'd get them off the street at least. And that way you'd have, some halfway decent flow through there. If there was ever, and there has been accidents and stuff, but, any real emergency where a fire truck would have to get in there, forget it. You couldn't get a fire truck through there. You can't even get a car through there, let alone something with an emergency. So, that was my only concern. I'm doing what I can to put in my own barriers, and we're trying to, keep the trash down. But, it's just amazing, the trash that we get out of those businesses. And maybe you guys can ask them to put in a trash can like some of the other businesses you see, that instead of everything just being thrown out the window.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But I don't go on that street anymore because you can't get to it. And I don't drink that kind of coffee, so.
All right, thank you.
All righty.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the
Don't
commission?
shoot me for this one,
No,
but
real quick though, keep
do
that in mind
have
just while
one.
we're thinking about it.
Mhm.
We dug up the site plan for the orthodontist office to the south of it. That does have 28 new parking spaces. The building across the street only had 19, and I know we've looked through the near map and see 6 to 8, maybe 10 vehicles before that site was developed that are always on the street. So, hopefully that, the majority of that should be able to be accommodated out of that almost 30 new parking spaces at the ortho.
But in the dental office, they're going to fill that vacant space,
I don't know
well,
about that.
or expand.
Yeah,
That happens to be my dentist. And so they may expand into that space, but that's going to equate to staff. And so, there still could
Maybe
be
another review
parking
that we have
issues.
to do.
I agree, it will definitely be improved with the 28 spaces from the new office. Maybe they're friends with the dentist and they'll let them park over there, I don't know.
I said maybe they can just go over to the bank.
Yeah. We'll get a cup
Okay.
of coffee.
Janessa, do you have a question?
I was just curious if it's plausible to add a exit from the credit union onto Middle Road, or is that way too close to the corner?
Not because.
Down there, like where the
stop
sidewalk
lights.
is? On the back end? To allow more traffic through?
It's not something that we could require of them.
Is it too close to the intersection to do it, or too
You're
close
only
to the corner?
150 feet from the intersection, and you're also in a transition and a taper there.
Mm-hmm.
Plus we're gonna.
It's just a thought for traffic flow in the,
Yeah,
In and out of
unfortunately,
the
I would
area?
always prioritize the arterials over a backup on a local street. Unfortunately, we'd have to.
sure, I can see how that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, one of these times where we're punished for the success of one business in there, unfortunately. Or two.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Please do.
I would like to move for approval of case 23-030, site development plan for Lot 3 at Quail Ridge Point subdivision, subject to staff recommendations.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, great, we have a second. Any further comment? I will just say, while I don't like the traffic
Right.
and the issues, I understand that it's beyond our control and it fits, it works, we're just gonna have to do it and hope that the kids learn how to drive.
The source of the problem
Good luck with that.
has already been approved.
Yes,
And that's an
exactly.
existing issue. That's
and-
not part of the credit
And
union.
it's definitely something that our police department's aware of. I can tell you Sergeant Champion, who's in charge of our traffic division, has sat up there more times than I can count over the last 5 years since they've been in there.
Okay, good.
And we do
All right.
have some cameras that monitor that as well.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and it looks like the last case is deferred till next month. Any commission updates?
Yeah, you should have received an email today, and a save the date. Prior to that, we will have a work session. This will be our first time to really share with you the work we've been doing behind the scenes on the comprehensive land use plan with our consultant RDG, the plan update, I should say. So would love to have your attendance. That will be a joint session of all city council, board of adjustment, and planning and zoning, so it's like a mega meeting. You can have, it's open to the public. It won't be public participation. It'll be a work session, so you'll be, digesting information and responding. And then I would mention that you probably noticed Ann Ganaway is not here today. She has had to step down because of challenges with her new position. She was recently promoted at her employer and has taken on a lot of new responsibilities. So she is no longer able to serve, but we do thank her for her service. She was a wonderful member of this commission.
Great. Well, I hope everything goes well for her. We'll miss her. All right, with that,